Here we are, the last religion of the Middle East that I want to talk about. This is a major religion, the second largest religion in the world. As you know, Christianity is number one. Islam is the fastest growing religion. Doesn't have the fastest converts, that was Christianity, but it's the fastest growing religion, largely because Islam is growing population. Many Muslims are having many children. So it's the fastest growing population, fastest growing religion according to the population. There we go. I don't know if I got carried away with the Christianity, but I got into a lot of detail, and then I talked about the smallpox, the Northern Ireland conflict, and how religion helps lower these problems, and religion plays a role in how people live. I think that's an important thing. You can be someone like Richard Dawkins, if you've heard of him. He's a famous atheist. He says religion plays a negative role. There's a guy named Christopher Hitchens. He wrote a book called God Is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. But where you stand, that religion does play a positive role, religion plays a negative role. You can find good, you can find bad examples, but you got to look at them in a very deep way. And I'm challenging you to do that as you get older and as you're a student, to really look at these things. Because like I said, we put boxes into things. We take Christianity and we say, Ned Flanders, strict people, strict rules, that's Christianity. And yet we don't really go in the depths and look at what it actually is, how has it played a role in history. And we, especially as a nation and as people, we can be very guilty of that with Islam. When we think of Islam, we think of these stereotypes, we think of these ideas, and we put Islam in that box. And I talked about how Islam is a religion of peace. It means peace. What does that mean? What is Islam? And I know a lot of people, when you think of Islam, you think, well, this is Islam. Is it really Islam? Let's look at that. And let's look at what Islam teaches and get an idea from that. Okay, so here's Islam. It is the main religion in the Middle East. You can see that the dark green and the light green are Muslim nations. Indonesia is the largest populated Muslim nation that is not in the Middle East, as you can see down here. Arabs, again, people from the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, they make up only about 20 to 30% of the Muslims in the world. So you have Muslims all in the Persian areas, Turkey, Egypt, and then in this area. So while it is by far the major religion in the Middle East, it's not only in the Middle East. So that's a key thing I want you to get. I talked about Christianity and how do you get right with God, and how, Christians do good works, but it's a result of the faith and the gratitude that they see in God for their religion. For Islam, it's a mixture. It's a little different. It's not just, some people debate how different it is. There is actually a significant difference. Here is faith and good works. So for Islam, it's both that get you right with God. Christianity would say it's faith, and that faith as a result causes the good works, but it's faith alone that gets you right with God. Okay, so what does that mean? If you have just faith, that's not good. God's not going to be impressed. You're not going to be in a good relationship with God. If it's just good works, that's not good. There we go. If it's just good works, that's not good. You need the faith too. So these both go hand in hand, and yet they're separate things. The result is Muslims believe God forgives your sins if you have faith, and you strive to win your favor with God. And you hope, there's no guarantee with Islam, you hope He accepts you. Okay? Now, let's talk about the good works element. Basically, the good works of Islam can be defined by the 5 pillars. The 5 pillars of Islam are the key things that all Muslims must do. 1, you got to believe in Allah. Allah is the monotheistic, one God, the one true God. 2, you have to believe in charity. You have to give to the poor, about 2.5% of your money. Another one is the Ramadan. That is a holy month. You cannot eat or drink during the month of Ramadan while the sun is up. So you can eat and drink when the sun is down, but not while the sun is up. So you do that the whole month. It makes you dependent on God. it makes you sacrifice these worldly desires and focus on spiritual desires. Another thing you do is the pilgrimage to Mecca. Mecca is the center of Islam. It's located right here. Every Muslim, if they have the money, needs to go to Mecca. This is the center of Mecca, this pilgrimage to Mecca. It's called the Kaaba. And this Kaaba is, they believe, built by Abraham. Just like Jews, Christians, and Muslims also believe in Abraham and the stories of the Jewish Hebrew Bible as well as the Torah. But here we got the Kaaba. Abraham built this, and they go to this place and they do the Hajj. It's a pilgrimage, and they follow the footsteps of Abraham and follow the footsteps of Muhammad. I want to talk about Muhammad for a second. Muhammad is the last, and he is the major prophet of Islam. He is the prophet. Christians do not believe in Muhammad, and Jews do not believe in Muhammad. Muhammad is a man who received messages from God, and he put them down in the book called the Quran. The Quran is the holy scripture of Islam. And you can see right here where he ascended, he went into heaven, and this is where they believe that happened. It's called the Dome of the Rock. This is in Jerusalem. Do you remember another religion that holds Jerusalem to be very important? Christians believe Jesus died in Jerusalem. They don't have any special allegiance to that city, but the Jews do. Remember the Western Wall? And doesn't that look familiar? Yes, that's the Dome of the Rock. So here you have the Jews' holiest site and the Muslim holiest site right next to each other. And yes, that is going to cause for some conflicts. So you have two important sites we talked about. We have Mecca, and they do the pilgrimage where they follow the Kaaba. This is God's presence on earth, a symbol for that. And they follow the footsteps of Abraham and Muhammad there, according to Muslims. And what also is part of the 5 pillars is you pray. You pray 5 times a day. And you always face Mecca. So if you're a Muslim in the United States, you face east towards Mecca. And what are you doing? You're facing the Kaaba. And here are minarets, by the way. These are called minarets. You see them in mosques. And from these mosques, they have these minarets, and music, or the Muslim prayers come out of these mosques, and people stop and they pray. And they do these prayers. And you saw images of them in class. So those are the 5 pillars of Islam. You definitely need to know that. And that is the good works. Those are the things that allow you to have hope that you will be rewarded for doing those things. I want to talk about this whole box thing of, real quick. Another one is the crescent moon. That is the symbol of Islam. But we talked about, when you think of Islam, a lot of people think terrorism, radical Islam, strict laws, and things like that. Well, I can give you a counter example to that to make your life more complicated in thinking these things. That's what I hope to do, to make you challenge your initial beliefs. Malcolm X was a civil rights leader in the 1960s in the United States, and he was someone that was not a very peaceful civil rights leader. He took the opposite approach of Martin Luther King Jr. He was all about black power, stay away from white people, you can't trust them, and he was very divisive with those things. He ends up converting to Islam, goes to Mecca, sees Muslims from all different regions. There's Muslims in Bosnia, there's Muslims in Europe, Asia, and he sees them all getting along. And it's very powerful and moving to him when he goes to Mecca, when he goes here. And because of that, he becomes peaceful and he changes his views. So here's an example of a Muslim becoming peaceful, or a person becoming peaceful because he becomes Muslim. So that should challenge your initial views of Islam and what that religion is all about. And also in challenging what Islam is all about, I want to bring this up. It's called Sharia. Sharia is how you interpret the laws of the Quran. Again, Muhammad wrote the Quran, and these are supposed to be, according to Muslims, these are the laws and the things that Allah has told the people to live by. Sharia is the moral laws in the Quran and how you interpret them. You probably heard in the news, Sharia law, strict law on how women or men should act and how they should dress and what they can and cannot do. I want to make this clear. When you think of Islam, some people think of these things, and they think, oh, okay, it says in the Quran, this is what women should wear. This is what women should wear. But that's not true. And in fact, there's only 3, 4, maybe 5 verses in the Quran, sections of the Quran that talk about women's clothing. And they basically say you should have your veils wrapped around you. You should cover your private parts. Or you should draw clothing over yourselves. You should dress modestly. Well, what does that mean? Different cultures and different Muslims interpret that differently. Cover your private parts. Well, are your eyes part of your private parts, or your necks? Or if a man sees your neck, they start lusting and they start thinking about you in inappropriate ways. So you're not dressing modestly. Well, in Afghanistan, they wear an outfit that looks like this, a burqa right here. Saudi Arabia, they dress more like this. By the way, these have been banned in France recently, and it's been a controversial move, but France does not want to see this type of Islam in their country, so they've banned it. But then you can go to other countries. In the United States, you see Muslim women dressed just like every other woman in the United States. They're wearing blue jeans, they're wearing a sweatshirt, they're wearing a t-shirt, and there it is. So the important thing is, when you look at even Judaism, when you look at Christianity, when you look at Islam, you got to look at what is in those verses. What is the spirit of the law? What is the spirit of what's trying to be said? What's the context? What's the meaning behind it? Is it still appropriate now? Was it written as a cultural thing? Those are questions you got to look at when you look at any religion. And we'll go into Hinduism, Buddhism. We'll go into ancestor worship, all different types of things, and you got to really understand why they do what they do before you criticize it, if you choose to criticize it. So I believe I covered the key things of Islam. They practice in a mosque, they practice on Saturdays, and there it is. 2 holy sites: Saudi Arabia, Jerusalem, the Kaaba, the Dome of the Rock. 5 pillars, those are the good works, plus you need faith. The faith is believing in the one true God, the monotheistic Allah. Oh, I knew I was forgetting one thing. There are 3 groups of Muslims, three different belief systems, belief groups in Islam. You have the Sunnis and the Shia. You have the Shia and the Sunnis. The Sunni are in the light green. They make up about 80% of the Muslims in the world. The Shia are basically in Iran and Iraq. Iraq's split up, and we'll talk about what role that has played in Iraq. It hasn't been a very positive role, yet they're starting to work together, and hopefully that'll be a benefit for them for working together. But Sunnis make up the majority. Shia are in Iran, and mainly in Iran. There's another group called the Sufi. They're very mystical and spiritual. They make up a very small number of people, so we're not going to talk about them too much. And there it is. Just like with Christianity, you have Catholics and Protestants, and in Islam, you have Sunnis and Shia. Okay? So that's the crescent moon. We're done with the religions of the Middle East.